So welcome to Little Bay, and this is the office. There you go. Life is tough down here, but isn't it absolutely stunning? We've got this wonderful rock pool here, and beaches, beautiful water, and I'm not too sure what happened to the 13-foot seas that they were predicting, but I'm very glad they didn't come along. Apologies to the surfers amongst you. So we're going to basically have a little look at some of the rock pool inhabitants that live around on the Sydney rock shelf here down at Little Bay. Little Bay's a little bit different than many of the places. Some of the times we go to South Maroubra, that's a lot more wave action, whereas this is a lot more sheltered. So we get different types of creatures. And we've actually cheated a little bit because we have to when we're doing this technology stuff. And so our fabulous Dylan over here has been in snorkeling. Dylan's been snorkeling and come in and got lots and lots of creatures for us to have a look at, which is fantastic. So as much as I would love Rockpool walks to be as easy as the next one, this one's going to be, they're not. But usually we're doing a 2-hour walk and we're covering 400 or 500 meters. But we would see similar amounts of stuff. We would just see it over a much, much wider area. But thanks to our fabulous snorkeler, Dylan, we have condensed it all into one place. So hang on to your hats and we will go forth. Thanks, Dylan, mate. That's brilliant. Great. Now, I'm going to try not to break my neck while I do this. And George, don't fall in. Okay. Okay, I'm not too sure what it means, but here we are. So we're going to have a little look in this rock pool, and we're going to start off with the things that people don't get that excited about when they get to the rock platform. So things like these snails here. Can we see these down on the rock, George? These little bumps on the rock don't look like much, but they are limpets. And these limpets, these little dudes here, are like little lawnmowers. They go onto the rock and they chomp, 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 chomp all the seaweed. Now, if you can see here, on this limpet is actually covered in green seaweed. That's what it likes to eat. And the green seaweed, the only place it can actually grow on here is on top of its predator, which is quite a clever strategy when you think about it for a plant. Anyway, it's very, very, very good. These things here modify the whole area. If they weren't living on these rocks, all the wet rocks would be covered in that green fuzz that you just saw on top of the limpet. It would be absolutely covered. There's actually a little blue box that we show at South Maroubra, which has got poisonous paint all around it, and that stops the snails getting in. And inside that box, lots and lots of green seaweed. So it would look very, very different. But when you come down to the rocks, you see these little bumps on the rock, and it's like, whatever. They're very important. Limpets, the first stars of our little rock pool show. And then we've got various other types of snails. If we can come down here, George. Okay, so here we've got different kinds of snails. We've got these ones here, and these are what's called a top snail, because it only has one little hole, and the whirl of the shell goes around and round and round like that to the point. And these are little, what's called a zebra trochid, these ones. They are a lovely little snail that lives up here in the rock pools, quite happy. There's lots of different kinds. These are the limpets again. That one hasn't been grown on. It must be a fast limpet, that one. And then you've got other snails like this, which is called a Mulberry Wilk. And that Mulberry Wilk, let me just put a bit of water on it. You can see that it looks a bit like a mulberry now. And that little snail. Now, we're going to have a look at a couple of snails that Dylan found while snorkeling. They're a bit bigger. Okay, sure. Sure thing. Okay, well, I'm going to pull these things up and then we can just do it in hand. So I've got these snails that are coming out of the water now are nice and a bit bigger. So we've got two snails here, and if you can see, they're quite different shapes. This one here is quite rounded, but you can see the whorl of the shell goes around all the way up to the point. Whereas this one, the whorl starts over here and goes much more pointy all the way to the end. Same basic shape, but this one's quite flattened and this one's quite pointed. When you turn them over, there's quite, oh, hello. We have an extrovert snail going on here. This is the actual snail itself, the black little beastie here, and the white is its foot. And it's going, oh, I don't like the sunlight. So it's now closing its trapdoor. And of course, as soon as I say it's closing its trapdoor, what does it do? No, it is going to close its trapdoor, aren't you? You are. Look, it's closing its trapdoor. And this thing here is the trapdoor. Looks a bit like an ear. It's a bit of a weird thing. So if you find those on the beach, these little flat discs that look weird, like ear-shaped things, they're the actual trapdoor of this kind of snail. And this snail, because it sits like this and goes round and round, it's called a turban snail because it looks like a turban. And that one there, oh, it's come out again. I might actually just put that on my hand while I talk about this one. And this one here, the animal's inside, but it's a much speedier beast, this one. And it has a very different type of trapdoor. Has a very flat one, a bit like a fingernail. It's like a big fingernail that sits just there, not as hard and thick as that one, much finer. And it is inside as well. So you've basically inside these two shells. Now this one might work. I can feel it's already stuck to my hand. We'll turn it over. Oh, there we go. So that's its foot, and then that's its black body. And this is its head up this end. Now maybe, oh, here we go. It's coming out, and we can see, just about see the antennae. There it is. It's just trying to work out what on earth is going on. But if I block the sun, maybe it will come out a bit more. There we go. Doesn't like the sunlight, much prefers shade. So these two are very different shapes, and not only that, but they are very different smells. One here, this one here is round, and this one here, can you see that, George? There's a groove right in the end of it. Can see the groove? Just here, there's a groove. So if I fill this one with water, it will pour really nicely, like a milk jug. Whereas this one here, no, it's round. And the difference between these two is that this one here, the groove, it can put out its eyes, it can put out its tongue, basically, because when it smells, it tastes the water. And it's tasting the water to try and find its food. Because this one here is a meat eater or a carnivore. Okay? Whereas this one is round, it doesn't have this, it doesn't need to put its eyes, or it doesn't need to find its food because its food is all over the rocks. And this one here is a plant eater or a herbivore. Okay? So herbivore, way to remember this. And when you guys come on a real Rockpool walk in January, as part of the Randwick's Marine and Coastal program, you'll be able to tell me this one, and I'll be checking. Nice and round like a salad bowl. Round like a salad bowl means it's a plant eater, because salads are plants. Plant eater. Whereas this one pours like gravy onto meat. So this is a meat eater, the gravy boats and the salad bowls. We told you this one was called a turban snail, and this one is called an orange triton snail. And you get really, really big ones of these, and in the movies you might have seen that they cut the end off. The Pacific Islanders have really, really big ones. The tropical ones of these are huge. They cut the end off, and then they blow it like a little trumpet. Very cool creatures. Okay, I'm going to pick all these ones up. Oh, got another friend here that's come out. Oh, there he is. And this is called a tent snail. It has a round hole, so it's a salad bowl. So it's a plant eater. Excellent. I'm going to give these back to Dylan, and he'll take them back to the sea, because we always put things back where we find them, especially those sea stars you find down where it's really wavy. You show mum and dad, and it's really cool. Don't put them in those pools up the top of the shoreline, because they will cook up there. They have to go back where they found them. So just going to go and give these to Dylan. Excellent. Thanks, mate. That's brilliant. We'll put those friends back. Just make sure I've got everybody. Now, when you're on the seashore, you will find these guys down here, the little ones. They look much the same, but now if I keep it, I know that the connection is not so brilliant. We've got round like a salad bowl and pointy with a little groove gravy boat. So this one's the plant eater, and that's, remember I call that a zebra snail. And this one is the mulberry snail or mulberry wilk. So same idea, plant eaters and meat eaters, but it's a rock pool, so obviously they're much smaller. We'll put these back where we found them as well. Excellent. So now we've found some snails. Can we go for a slow walk over here, George, so it doesn't glitch all over the place? Oh, whoa. Oh dear, George, that was, everybody nearly got wet. Classic. Okay, so we've now got a different kind of snail. And there were two in here, but Houdini, the escape artist, got out. And I actually can't see Houdini anymore. he's gone, or maybe, or she, quite possibly, because she was quite a big one. She might have zoomed off. However, we do have one that did stay in nicely. Well done, snail. Okay, so now this is a sea hare. All right, so this is a sea hare. Now, it's a snail without a shell. It's a type of sea slug. So just like in the back garden at home, oh, you found another one. Oh, well done. You found Houdini. Good on you guys. We've got a couple of little explorers down here who found Houdini for us. Well done. That's brilliant. Oh, there we go. Reunited with our friends. Classic. Absolutely classic. Where are we? Yes, you're the right way up. So here we are. Oh, look, found his friend. That's fantastic. So these are a sea slug. And a bit like in the back garden, you've got snails that have the shell, and you have slugs without the shell. These ones in the sea, these ones don't have a shell, and the ones we saw before do have a shell. I'm just going to get them wet because they don't like the sunlight. So you just keep the camera there, George, and they'll be right. Actually, can you get down there? Is that feasible? Because they're much happier. They're much happier. Oh, that's good. We can. I can even perch on this rock. Fantastic. So, yes, they're much happier like this. Look at that. Houdini's especially happy. So it's got its rhinophores, or its antennae, for want of a better word, up there. And you can see why they're called hares, because they have the big eerie looking things sticking up. And they are quick. Relative to other snails, that is. They're not super fast compared to other types of creatures, but compared to snails, they're very fast. Now I'm going to put our friend here. I don't know whether you can still see that, George. Oh yeah, it's quite calm. The tide is nice and low now, so this rock pool is giving us good protection from the waves. And that's important when you go down to the rock pools. You want to Google low tides in Sydney. And you want to go, I don't know, maybe an hour to half an hour before, but then plan to, but plan to leave, you know, probably half an hour at the latest afterwards, because when the tide turns, it turns very fast. So it's nice and protected in here now. And you can see that these guys are moving quite quickly. Snails, that is. And you can see that on their backs, they've got these funny frills, haven't they? Inside those funny frills are their gills. And they also have a ink sac as well. So they can squirt out ink. And some of this, I think this species on the left here, that one actually produces a purple dye. And in the old days, in the Roman Empire, they used to use those sea slugs to get the purple dye to dye the robes of royalty purple. So that's where it came from. Pretty cool. Well, they seem to be happy and they're exiting stage left. So we'll leave those friends there and they can go and do their, oh, crikey. Well, they can go and live their lives quite peacefully in the pool because that's where they came from. Now, before we leave this little bit, we're just going to have a quick look at, can I keep, is that okay? This thing here is what's called a sponge. A bit different to the one you use in your bath. Oh. But it would have been attached down here at one point, must have been knocked off by big seas. And this would have come from much deeper out there. But we get some serious seas here and it's been knocked off. So this beautiful sponge here is actually made up of lots of little individual animals that all grow together in this amazing thing. And they're all just living together, all of these things. So it's kind of, it's a bit like us. It is kind of multicellular, but it's actually not. It's just they're all living together basically in a giant apartment block that they build for themselves. So each one of those dots, I've got no idea if we can actually see those little dots, but maybe each one of those little dots is a sponge cell. And it grows a little box made of glass, actually, and it lives in that. And then the next one builds it. So it's like a giant three-dimensional high-rise building, imagine, where they build this glass dwelling that they live in. And when they die, that's when they, that's the kind of sponge that we know, the brownie colored sponge that's got all the holes in, and that's why it can suck up lots of water, because the animals died and gone, but the little glass house that it's built is still there, and it's quite elastic too. So it squashes, and then it can suck up water, and that's what sponges have been used for thousands of years. Very, very long time. This is an ex-sponge, unfortunately, but it might survive in this pool for a little while. So we'll let it live out its days in this pool. Now,
Will?
Yes, indeed.
Would this be a good time to answer some questions? Because there's been some questions about your presentation so far.
Brilliant. That's a really good time, yes.
Okay, so we've got we've got quite a few. I might just start from the bottom because it's more relevant. So how large can a sponge get?
Oh, crikey. Some of them, there are so many different kinds of sponges, it's incredible. But some of the ones in Western Australia, they grow this, you know, I was saying their houses are made of glass. They grow this massive silica glass rod that's meters long. And they find these things down deep in the ocean, and they've just got these gigantic spikes. And you can get basket sponges that are, you know, this big across. So the sponges together, each little one is tiny. It's, you know, like a little dot. Like if you put a dot on a piece of paper with a ballpoint pen, that's basically a sponge cell. But they can grow all together in these humongous barrel sponges and basket sponges. They just can be just really, really huge. But we don't get them so much here. We're talking more in the tropics for the big ones.
So do animals live in the sponge, or do animals sponge cells come together to make up the sponge? Good question.
Okay, so they don't kind of come together, they just bud. They're all clones of each other. So it's a bit like a coral. One divides and becomes two. Two divide becomes 4, 8, 16, 32. It's a bit like RAM, really. 32, 64, 128, 256. You know, so that's how it works. It's growing exponentially, which is very relevant at the moment because we have another creature that is growing exponentially, and that is our dear unfriend, COVID-19. And that virus grows exponentially as well. So it's the same kind of principle. And that's why you get this fan sort of shape. You get the 1 down here, and then the 2, and then the 4, and then the blah, 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 and they grow like a big fan like that. So you can see that it's growing bigger and bigger exponentially all the time. That's great. Any questions on the snails, Helen?
There was one, Daniel's asked, what roles do sponges and snails play in the marine ecosystem?
Wow, okay. All right, so I'll take the snail first because the snails have already gone back. So snails eat the seaweed, and most snails eat seaweed. And once they've eaten the seaweed, they are then food for predators or carnivores. So they are taking in, so the plants. Let's show you this plant here. Okay, now, this bit here, the pink bit, the nice dark pink bit is alive. And that's called a Coraline algae because it's like a coral. And you can see the corally bit there, that's the limestone skeleton. That plant, or the green algae that's just there, that plant takes in the sunlight and carbon dioxide and a few nutrients, and by the magic of photosynthesis, it turns that into body tissue. So it's going, sucking up energy and carbon dioxide and turning it into plant tissue. Animals can't do that. So they have to eat plants. So the animals eat the plants, herbivores eat the plants, and then the carnivores eat herbivores. So that allows it to get more complex. So we can have complexity in the system. And as I said, the limpets, they keep the rocks clear of all the green seaweed. Now, just before we go off this, here is an example of bleaching. Now, you might have heard of bleaching up on the barrier reef, coral bleaching. Well, this is pink Coraline algae that is bleached. So you can see the white algae here, dead. And if I pull a little bit off and put it on there so you can see it. Can you see the fan shape of that? Okay, that's how the pink seaweed grows. And this bit here is still alive, that bit. And this is the same thing, same kind of pink seaweed, but it's not branching. It's growing like, almost like paint on the rock. And this one here is really, really good out in the big waves because it is much, much tougher than the fronds. Okay, so that's a bit of bleached red seaweed or red algae. Okay, now we're going to have a look. We're going to move on. And what? Can you tell me the time? It's half past. Brilliant. We're halfway there. Now we're going to look at a different group of creatures. Has anybody ever line? Beautiful, like egg-shaped shell type things belong to. You're kidding me. The one behind me. Ah, yes. Okay, and what happened to our little purple? That's the little purple job. Never mind, doesn't matter. Okay, so yes, that was probably not. We trusted them too much. These things are a lot faster than you realize. When you put them down, you think, yeah, they'll stay there for the
Wow.
show, no problem. And they haven't. This one here is a big black spiny sea urchin, Centra stephanus. It's not actually, now that you can see it in the sunlight, it's not actually black, is it? It's actually kind of like a dark purple, reddy sort of color. And these big black spines here are for protection. Now you imagine if something tries to get at this, ow, it can't get in, it can't eat it, because it's protected, isn't it? With all of these spikes. Now, if you get a big fish or a big crayfish, bigger than 14 centimeters, it's strong enough to knock it over on its back. And then when you knock it over on its back, you can see the mouth, which is here. Can we see the mouth there, George? Should I come to you a bit? Okay. So there's the mouth there, and you can see the teeth. Can you see those white jaws? Very cool. It's got 5 teeth. Now, it's also soft around here. The red bit of skin there is soft. So when the predators are big enough, they can knock these on their backs and get in there and eat them. Okay? And that's part of the problem in New South Wales and most of southern Australia, to be honest, is there used to be lots of predators of these things. Trouble is, a bigger predator came along 200 years, and we fished out most of the things that eat them. The crayfish, the carnivorous fish, the bigger carnivorous fish that eat these things. And so these things have just exploded in numbers. Then another thing that we did over the last 200 years, the sea got warm. The sea off the east coast of Australia has gotten at least a degree, at least a degree warmer. And that's allowed the babies of these to keep going further south, because they don't like the cold. I don't either, but I must admit, but these guys really don't like the cold. So they could only keep going so long as the water got warmer. But it has, over the last 40 to 50 years, the water has gotten warmer and warmer and warmer all the way down the coast. So they went from New South Wales down to Victoria, then all the way across the Bass Strait to Tasmania, and they have circumnavigated the whole of Tasmania. They only really like the east coast of Tasmania because too much cold water comes up the west coast, thankfully. But also, they don't like the big rock lobsters or crayfish, as we call them here, because the crayfish can eat them. By turning them over there, you can see the jaws a bit better there. Oh, look at that. Cool. Yes. And the trouble is, these things now have eaten a lot of the seaweed around Tasmania, and there's not that many left. So, well, it's gone to Victoria. Anyway, we'll leave that one there. So that's what's happened with these things, and they've caused huge ecological problems. They've just eaten so many of the seaweeds further south from here. And that's a big problem because, as I said, the seaweeds are the things that do the magic of photosynthesis, take the energy from sunlight, take the carbon dioxide and produce more body matter. Well, these guys are consuming all of that body matter way too much. And they're causing what's called urchin barrens. So, you know, people keep talking about global warming being a future thing. It's not. It happened and it crashed off Tasmania's rock lobster fishery, the black gold, the good old abalones. Again, they eat seaweeds. These guys have outcompeted them. And they've destroyed a lot of the kelp forests down in Tasmania. This has been happening for the last 40 years. As a marine biologist, global warming has pretty much half happened. We've lost 50% of the barrier reef. We've lost 95% of the giant kelp forests in Tasmania and southwestern WA, a lot of this has already happened in our books. Unfortunately, our beloved politicians haven't quite caught up with it yet, but next month, let's hope that we do. Good old Glasgow will be a very unlikely place to talk about global warming, but never mind, one of the coldest places I've ever been to. But yes. Anyway, this last thing we're going to talk about with our friend here is the teeth. It's got 5 teeth, which fortunately enough, hang on, my hand, George. Fortunately enough, the 5 teeth are like my fingers, and they come down and scrape the seaweed off the rock. Remember those toys you play after you've been to the cinema, where there's a grab and you try and get the lollies out of the thing, and you kind of never do because it's really, really difficult. These have got 5 claws, and they're much better at it, and they can just chew the seaweed off the rock. And these guys are producing quite a lot of sand because they turn it into sand, and then they poo it out. So next time you go for a sunbathe at the beach, thank the sea urchins because you're lying on sea urchin poo, which is a fabulous thing to think about while you're lying on your towel. There we go. So we're going to put our friends here now. I'm going to show you, maybe I shouldn't, this is a naked sea urchin. There it is. Now you can see that it's much the same shape, and it has the hole underneath, but this one doesn't have the teeth in the middle or the spikes. But you can see that each one of those spikes was attached to one of those little up things here, these little plugs basically. There's a hole in the middle of each of these with tendons, and that allows these, look at that, moving all over the place. You've never seen an urchin do a handstand before. It's very impressive. But they're moving all over the place because they can, and it doesn't know what's going on. Okay. Now there's a different kind of sea urchin. I'm going to put this there. I'm going to give this to Dylan. I'm going to have a little look at this beautiful one first. I'll put this against my shirt as a background. There we go. Can we see it in the light? This one's a little purple urchin. Right?
Will, you're lagging a bit.
Very different. Doesn't grow an awful lot bigger than this, maybe twice the size. Doesn't move, much smaller type of creature, much slower moving. Lagging, well, talk to optimists, I'm afraid. There's not much we can do, Ellen. I'm sorry. We're at a beach. Okay, I'll move and talk slower. Is that going to help?
Let's see.
Okay, so we can now look at this sea urchin. This one is quite different, isn't it? Doesn't have the big spiky things as the last sea urchin. It's called a pencil urchin because it still has a mouth underneath, and you can see the white jaws just in the middle there, but it protects itself in a different way. Right? It gets its spines and wedges itself in between rocks, and then things can't get it out. Apart from snorkelers like Dylan, who pulls the rock and then the thing falls out. So these pencil urchins, very cool creatures, don't really look that alive, and they don't move much. So they look like some sort of World War I sea mine or something bizarre, but they are amazing. Oh, sorry, keep it still, yes. All right, I'm going to give this back to Dylan as well, and we'll move on to the next section because we probably haven't got a lot of time left. 20 minutes, okay. Yes, we could have some questions if that works for you, Helen.
Yeah, sure. There's lots of questions. So what I might do is, with all the questions, I'll ask a few, and then at the end, if you're okay, we can sign off. But then if people want to stay longer to listen to the more answers to the question, we can do that. But
that sounds like a great plan. Yes.
Okay. So sea urchins. Whoa, lots and lots and lots and lots of questions.
Great.
How do sea urchins move? Do they drift across the water? This is Abby. How do sea urchins move? Do they drift across the water or settle down a rock for the rest of their life?
Both. Abby, I think you're actually right on the money. When they're babies, they have little tiny larvae that look a little bit like kind of shrimpy type things or prawny type things. And they swim through the water with the currents. And when they are old enough, they then settle on some rocks near to where some of their other adult species live. And then they change. There's a fabulous word. It's called metamorphosis. So they metamorphosize into the spiky adult. Once they're a spiky adult, then they only stay on rocks. They don't like sand. They just like rocks. And they have these little sticky tube feet. And I might be able to show you the sticky tube feet because another kind of creature has sticky tube feet, which is this sea star, which I'm just going to put underwater for a second. And then I can show George.
You're frozen, Will, so we can only see your...
Dear.
Oh, there we go. You can see the sea star now.
Okay, I'm just going to wet them. Hang on. Sorry for that. And I'm actually going to get him out. Okay. This one here is the best. Okay, so let's get these wet. Okay, I'm going to keep that there. Okay. Can we see wiggly little feet? See, this one's going to be better, this one here. Can you see these little wiggly feet? Hard to see in the sea urchins, but much easier in the sea stars. That's why they're not starfish, because they're actually cousins of the sea urchins. Sea urchin, seagull, sea snail, sea star. Okay, can you see the wiggly feet? Those little wiggly feet have a sucker on the end. Oh yes, this one's going off. Little wiggly feet. And they have a sucker on the end. And those suckers stick on really, really well. And it can basically stick, just like a millipede or something uses its legs on the land. These guys have sticky feet because on the land, there's no water moving. But in the sea, the water and the waves move really fast. So they have to stick to the rock. Otherwise, they would wash away, wouldn't they? So she's right. Abby's right. When they're babies, they do float around in the currents. But when they turn into adults, they stick with these little tube feet onto the rocks. And then they move like that. And the pencil urchins actually use their spines to actually kind of almost walk along in a comical sort of fashion. Oops. Now, talking of them walking along in a comical fashion, I shall put you down. So why don't we just segue from there into the sea stars, because we are running a little out of time. I'm going to turn some of these over. Okay. So on these, oops, I'm going to turn this one over too. Different kinds of sea stars. I've got two different kinds of sea stars on my hand. These are the common 8-armed sea stars. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This one can count. Excellent. Sometimes they've got 9, sometimes they've got 7 or 6. You never know. Now, this one here is supposed to be an 11-armed sea star, but it's only in preschool. It's a baby, and it can't count. So it's only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, but it does have, I don't know whether you can see that, George. Can you see the little tiny arms that are growing on it? Little tiny, tiny arms just here that are starting to grow. So as it gets bigger, it will end up with the full complement of 11, and sometimes be even 15. But that's for the real smarty pants. But when it's a youngster like this, it's only got the four full arms, and then it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little, so 9. Not bad. It's good for a preschooler, that one. Not bad at all. So these little guys are the sea stars, but they do, hard to tell on this one, but let's put it, maybe I'll put it on my shirt again. Can we see, actually on my hand, can you see that there's little tiny spikes, just little ones here, little tiny spikes on top? Yep. All sea stars have spikes on top. They're again for protection. Not as long, obviously, as the sea urchins, but much the same. And when you turn these guys over, they also have a mouth in the middle. That's the best one. They have a mouth in the middle underneath. Can you see that one there? That's the mouth in the middle. So these guys are, again, are like little lawnmowers. They wake up and the mouth is in the middle, and they will then walk around and chew up the seaweed that's on the rocks. So the herbivorous snails, the plant-eating snails, the sea stars, the sea urchins, all of these things basically wander around the rocks chomping on the poor old seaweed. And the seaweed thankfully grows very fast. So these guys just keep munching, and they modify what the system looks like. If these guys all took a big holiday, then all of this area would just be covered in seaweed, absolutely thick with it. But they keep it, they're the gardeners of the rock platforms, would you say? So that's the sea stars. Now, I'm going to put these guys back in the little collection bag. Get in. Okay. There we go. And we've got one more sea star. I'll bring it up to you, George. Come on. Okay. Let's just... All right. Okay. Are you still there, Helen? Someone's ringing. Is that Helen?
Yes, I'm here. I'm not ringing. Oh, that's a Brittle Star.
Not ringing. So we've got the Brittle Star here. Fantastic. Sorry, I couldn't hear, so I was just wondering if that phone call was you. So this one is a Brittle Star. Now, it has the typical star shape of the 5 arms, and if I'm very gentle, don't break on me, you can see it's actually got the mouth in the middle. Now, these guys here don't really use their tube feet anywhere near as much, but they use their arms like snakes. Can you see how they're moving? Aren't they amazing? More like an octopus than a sea star, really. I'm going to put this on. Now, is there a good rock? Okay. There's a rock that it will live under here. Can you come with me, George? Oh, what time is it, Bill? Okay, we're going to put this down on the rock, okay? And I'm just going to nudge it this way because this way is darkness. And it will actually, hopefully, use its arms. On the end of each arm is a little light sensor. And it will now be sensing that the arm nearest to me is dark and the other arms have got sun on it. And it, with any luck, should start moving itself underneath where all the nice shade is for it, because it doesn't like sunlight. It's now going to try and find, there we go, you see, it worked. It's using those little light sensors in its arms, and it's saying, right, safety is this way. And it's going to go under this rock. Cool, there we go. Now this rock is actually upside down, George. Is he still moving? Okay. Go on, well done. Can you just pan up to this rock? If anybody goes down to Clovelly and starts to see rocks that are like this, that's a problem, because this rock is upside down. It's got tube worms, sponges, all sorts of things living on here. It's actually upside down. So I'm just going to upset that poor old sea star and turn it the right way up, like that. There we go. Because the seaweed should be on the top. Yeah, because it needs the sunlight. Whereas the sponges and all the critters that live under the rock don't like the sunlight.
Wow.
So if you see rocks that are upside down like that at Clovelly, it's because people are turning them over to get the sea urchins to feed the blue gropers, which is very naughty. And it's a $5,000 fine if you're caught. Somebody they've turned over the rock to see what's there. Us, looking after the environment as marine biologists, turned it over and haven't put it back the right way up. The light-loving seaweed on top, and it also kills the sponges and all the other critters that live under the rock as well. So if you find things, that's fantastic. You can pick them up, have a look at them. Don't hold them for too long. Put them back where you found them, including the rocks. because the things that are living on the rocks are also alive. All righty. We're now going to move over. Sorry?
Will, Amelia
Yes.
asked, why do so many of these animals hate sunlight?
Well, that's a very good question. So ask Amelia, what do we have to do on a hot summer's day in the middle of summer before we go to the beach? We have to put on sun cream, put on a hat. This is my shade, isn't it? I've brought my rock with me from my head. This is my rock. Here it is on top of my head, producing shade for me. Yeah. I realize it would be better vision if I didn't have my hat on, but unfortunately, I have no hair on top of my head, so I would burn. So we've got that's why they love the shade, because the ultraviolet light from the sun is incredibly harsh and it can kill these creatures. Plus the fact, if you're in the shade, you're under a rock. And if you're under a rock, fish and other predators can't get at you. But if you're in the middle of the pool on the sand, you're easy to catch.